Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, so real quick. I started designing when I was 16. I ran an agency, a pretty successful one for the better part of 2 decades. I've been a consultant. I'm an executive coach, and I was the global brand and design guy for a $42 billion company. You want to know what the biggest problem as a design leader that I had throughout all of those that was consistent? Just getting people to do things. You're laughing, right? Our biggest problem as design leaders is just getting people to do the shit you want them to do. So, welcome to Influence and Persuasion for Design Leaders. I'm your host, your cruise director, your Sherpa, Andrew LaMonica, and welcome. So, I'm going to break this into 2 different parts. The first part is creating conditions for successful influence. We're going to talk a little bit about leadership. I'm going to talk to you about what is your most valuable influencing asset, and I'm going to talk to you about some common traps. Second part of this, I'm going to talk about tools and tactics. So creating conditions, tools, and tactics. I'm going to tell you just some best practices about influencing. Definitely things to do, things not to do, and a framework to kind of put this all together. Okay? That okay? Sound good? Feel good? Everything cool? Great, awesome. So, let me go back a little bit. Some guardrails. It's really important for me to provide value to you. Well, you're carving out time from your schedules, you're paying to be here, I want to give you some really good insights. I tend to be very practical and tactical in what I talk about. For those of you familiar with my chats, everything is very actionable, so you'll be able to kind of do stuff as soon as you leave here. Third thing, it's also really important for me to be inclusive. I know that you spend the day with your peers, and you're in a session, you're talking to a lot of people, some industry leaders, and I'm a pretty significant introvert, so it's really hard for me to raise my hand and ask a question in front of a crowd. It actually terrifies me. So, what I do, good to know some fellow introverts are in the room. Awesome, great. Cheers, man, salute. I'll take a bourbon whenever you're ready. So the being inclusive is really important. So one of the ways I address that is you're going to actually have the opportunity to interact with me through your phones, which is things everybody's comfortable with. So, also, I want to provide a lot of knowledge to you and actionable things with the time I got. So I tend to speak quickly, and there is a ton of content. So here's how I turn that bug into a feature. At the way end of this, I'm going to ask you to contribute some insights. And when you do, you are going to get an entire transcript of what I'm saying. It's about 14 pages of content, plus whatever else comes. So you're going to have a whole lot of information for you to use when you want to use it. Cool. Is that clear? Sound good? Feel good? Great. You can if you want. If you're like the sketchnote person, I'm going to talk about visual learning in a second. If you're that type of dude, awesome. People retain information in different ways, and they learn things. One of the things I do is I sit in the front because I have really bad ADD, but it allows me to retain a lot of information. If that works for you, cool. But just so you know, you will have information later. All right? Fantastic. All right, everybody, check out your phones. Go to this address, andelamanica.com/bureau. Okay. Now, there's a couple questions. Oh, whoa. All right. Okay, fantastic. What I'd like you to do is just answer the first question. There's a couple questions through this thing. You high performers in the group, don't go ahead, just do it one at a time. So first question I'd like you to answer. Now, what are the skill sets, what are the characteristics of a successful leader? Now, for me, it's things like trust, reputation. I gotta respect the person I'm doing. Grit, that's a good one. We'll put that in, awesome. Vision, also really important, very cool. I'll give you guys another 10 seconds to throw some stuff in there. Listening, empathy. Empathy always comes up a lot when I do this, nice. Transparency, honesty, all really good things. This feels like a leader that we would want to work for, right? Yeah? Yes? No? Crickets? Bueller? Okay, cool, fantastic, all right. Candor, that was a good one, credible. Okay, these are all really good things, awesome. Okay, so the skill sets for successful leadership falls into 4 buckets. People, processes, relationships, and driving business. Okay, so managing people, team building. Can you put the right people together to take care of the job? Developing talent. Not just like within the design team, but like also different parts of the org, that's coaching, that's mentoring. Managing diversity. I think we all understand that diversity and inclusion is a really good thing, like delivers better results. Crisis leadership. How are you when there are problems and you got to deal with it? Conflict management. How are you at resolving those problems? Processes. Project management. Are you on time and under budget? Problem solving. This is real versus like the cosmetic BS ones. This is also individual problems and problems at like a global scale. Customer focused. Are you anticipating their needs? Are you addressing problems? Are you thinking foresight? You have foresight about what they're going to need and want. That's customer focused. The UX people in the audience usually index pretty high on this one. Then relationships. Your interpersonal skills. It's basically like, do people like you? Do they like spending time with you? Relationship building, which is something really important and a couple of the other speakers talked about already. Persuasion, which we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today. Negotiation. Consensus building. If you're in a digital company, very important. That's how a lot of businesses are driven, by building consensus and a unified vision. Communication. Are you clear? Are you focused? Are you empowering? Are you inspiring? Now, driving business, innovation. Are you recognizing problems and putting steps together to fix them in a good way? Visionary leadership. That's long-term point of view about the business and building that shared vision with your peers. Business acumen, like the regular business fundamentals, but it's also like, can you manage a P&L? Can you do financial modeling? I personally suck at that, but that's a thing. Always learning. That's a thing really important with leaders. Like, are you resting on your laurels, or are you always trying to be better? And then strategic thinking, which is a big thing. It's that long-term competitive differentiation, delivering against business objectives, and like playbooks on how to do it. Okay, 19 skills of successful leadership. It's also a very lovely photo slide, if you were so inclined to take a picture. Now, it's okay. I'm going to go to this. Don't worry, I'm going to put it up in a second. It's okay, don't worry about it. Question number 2. So how many of those 19 skills do you need to be successful? I'll give you like 10 seconds to figure it out, and I'll throw this back up. Okay. 5 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 19, holding strong. Interesting. You 16 to 19 people, you tend to self-identify as high performers, which is cool. Welcome to the club. We're having jackets made. All right, that's fantastic. All right, so it seems like the high level on this, 70% of you is like in the 5 to 10 range. Truth is, if you are really good at just 3 of these, just 3, your success as a leader improves 50%. The problem is that most designers try to be all things to all people, and you can't do that. It leads to burnout, it slows your growth as a creative leader, and building the foundation of what we're going to talk about today, you're going to be less effective at influencing. So here's a question I know I'm going to get asked at some point, like, what is the skill or what is the bucket that makes you win the game of leadership? Unfortunately, there isn't one. There is no golden snitch that you can get. Studies vary depending on which level you are in your organization, but what I've seen and what a lot of the research says is that just being an authentic leader, like being, of those 19 skills, being the one that's true to you, that's honest and good and reflective of your personality as a leader, that's what's going to make you most effective. So the too long don't read on this one is the authentic leader, the good, the true, the honest. It's going to make you more effective at your job and more successful at influence and persuasion. Okay. All right. So what do you think is your most influential resource? It could be like a personal thing, like maybe you are charming. Maybe you have perceived power. Could be a functional thing of your title. Maybe you have a really large team, or you're working on a coveted project. Team, your father. I'd like to follow up with you. That's a really interesting answer. People, team, others. Woo, I'm not sure what woo is, but if you want to clarify that, I'd love to know. Community, your team, laid back, team personality. Interesting. Okay. So the truth is, your most valuable resource is time. When I joined GE, I was on the CMO's team. It was a highly visible team, it was a high-performing team, and it was a very high-pressure team. Time was the one resource that you can't create more of. You can't throw money at that problem to fix it, and you can't borrow it from another department. And some of the most effective leaders that I work with, they take care of their schedule very well because they need to put their time and energies on the right tasks, with the right people, and addressing the right problems. So as chief designer at GE would be very fond of saying, your best ability is availability. The time you spend on things directly correlates with how influential you can be. Cool? Okay. So one of the tools I want to share with you, this is called the Important Urgent Matrix. This is a super simple tool. It is deceptively effective. Business schools sometimes teach this as the Eisenhower matrix. A couple naughty heads, same thing. I use this pretty regularly to focus on like making the right decisions and making quick decisions on things. So I'll break this down for you really quickly. So when I say important is a task or action that brings you closer to your goals. Urgent is sometimes considered bringing someone else closer to their goals. Different is, yes, that's the difference between important and urgent. So that first box, that is important and urgent. Those are the 2 to 3 things that you absolutely positively must get done. That is like a business critical deadline you're dealing with. You know, it could also be like a child that's homesick. You gotta take care of that. It's FaceTime with a senior leader to address a problem, things like that. That's important and urgent. Box number 2 is important, but not urgent. That's driving progress on things, pretty much everything in box number 1. You're driving progress, you're taking care of things, you're pushing things forward. That is one-on-one time with your direct reports, that is clearing obstacles and roadblocks for your teams, stuff like that. The more time we spend in box number 2, box number 1 goes away. It's a great box. I love that box. Box number 3 is not important, but urgent. Email is a big culprit on this one. Text messages, Slack channel, people stopping by your desk asking for stuff. Meetings, well, not all of them, but you know the ones that you really don't want to be at or you're not needed at. Those are those things that have the guise of important, but they're not really important. They're usually important to someone else. So unfortunately, we spend a lot of time here and we don't have to. It's really common for designers to just get like roped into stuff and you have all of these things vying for your attention, so you just get kind of drawn to them because they are important to someone else. But when you own your schedule, someone else doesn't. So spend less time in this box. A couple really easy things you could do. Reschedule things. I know it's a super easy thing, but a lot of designers don't do that. They feel like they have to. You could just say to someone, it's good to be like, hey, look, I don't have the bandwidth for this, or it's not aligned with what I'm doing right now. Time boxing, giving things a certain amount of time to take care of stuff. There's a VP, a design buddy of mine. He only answers emails Tuesdays and Thursdays between 3 and 5. Works really well for him. You can delegate effectively, which is something I'm going to talk about next. Or you can push back on leadership respectfully, like the respectful saying no. If I've got time, I'll talk about that in a second. And then there's like the not important and not urgent. That's mindlessly scrolling on social media. That's the notifications on your phone. That's the BuzzFeed quiz on which Harry Potter character you are. Like that stuff. I'm Hermione, in case anybody cares. But like those things are just time sucks. So you gotta get rid of them or ignore them and they will just suck less. Okay, so this is a really simple framework that just works. And by focusing your time in the right place, when you're gonna be more productive, and you can elevate your skills of influence, which we'll be talking about shortly. Okay, effective delegation. So when you delegate the right way, you're doing actually a couple things really well. You're empowering the person that you are delegating a task to. You're giving them a really great opportunity to shine, and you're giving them visibility throughout the org. You are improving the relationship, which is always good in a work situation. And as a bonus, you are giving yourself more time to focus on the things that you need to focus on. Now, believe it or not, most people don't delegate well. What happens often is some leader takes the stuff that they don't want to do and they dump it on someone else. See, that's not delegating, that's just like a shitty boss. So try not to do that. I've been on the receiving end of that a couple times, so it's hard to kind of navigate out of those things. But as a leader, as a design leader, you have the opportunity to do it the right way and be a role model for it. So Here are the 10 steps to delegate effectively. This is GE approved. It works. And the 10 steps, you got to do it in order. So the first thing you're going to do, you're going to explain what it is. Here's what I want you to do. Then you're going to say, why them? And why not someone else? Next step, you're going to talk about outcomes. You're going to talk about parameters, goals, what you want the end result to look like. Then you're going to ask them to paraphrase this. Very important. You want to make sure that they're aligned with what you're thinking and what you're talking about. Next, you're going to ask them if they have any questions. And really good leaders, they're like, okay, I'll give you time and space to process things, especially if you got a team of introverts, where it's just like, my boss knew, my bosses were always really good at giving me a day to process things, so come back tomorrow, let me know if it works for you. Then you're going to ask if they're interested. You're looking for verbal commitment. After that, you're going to ask, how can you support them? As a design leader, you are their biggest opportunity for support and taking care of them. What obstacles can you remove? How can you help them be successful? Then, you're going to express confidence in them. As a design leader, you're their biggest cheerleader, and you're the most vocal mouthpiece for them throughout their organization, so use that. Then you're going to follow up. What you inspect, people respect. And then importantly, you're going to get feedback when it's over. What worked? What didn't? What did you learn? What can you do better? Now, there are a couple time-related traps when it comes to this type of influence. The big ones that I see, lack of sleep, distractions, and absence of trust. Lack of sleep is probably the easiest one to fix, but it's a big one because it works against both ends of the influence equation. When you are tired, when you are exhausted, you are actually less charismatic. Yes, it's true. There are scientific studies on beauty sleep. It's a thing. It makes you less effective at what you're trying to do. And on the other end of that, when you are tired, you make bad decisions, and you are not good at influencing. It actually decreases the cognitive functions. And there's a reason why infomercials are in the middle of the night. It's nothing to do with broadcast fees or anything like that. It's part of the framework. They want you to make bad decisions and buy their product. Distractions. It's another big thing. I'm going to yada the neuroscience, if everybody's cool with that. So your brain is really good at doing one thing effectively at a time. It's like a CPU. So when you try to do multiple things at once, there are 50% more errors, and it takes you 50% longer to do each one of those tasks. So just stop the multitasking. I know people brag about it, just don't do that. You're less effective as a design leader. You're laughing. Yes, I agree with you. It is true, yes. The big one, though, is absence of trust. Trust is one of the key ingredients to strong work cultures, high-performing teams. And there's a reason why the companies like the Apples and the Amazons and the Googles, they invest a lot into building trust with their teams. And as a design leader, there are a couple really easy things that you can do to build trust. One of them is just relationship building. Just get to know people, invest time with them. Know what their needs are and how you can help them. Ask for help. As a design leader, you are not expected to know everything, but ask for help when you need to. Admit mistakes or when you don't know something. Raise your hand on a project, take ownership of something, and that's really effective outside of the design team. If you're working with business or finance or marketing or legal, well, be like, hey, let me pitch in on that and let me help. It goes so far with building trust. Freely share your knowledge and your network. That's what I'm doing here. It's a good thing, and it's a really easy thing to do. And just also do the super tactical stuff, address problems quickly. Follow up on stuff. Be empathetic to your team. Understand the emotional temperature of what their needs are and how you can help them. Okay. Question number 4. What level are you trying to influence? And also, it's a little tag in there to kind of what level are you, so I can understand dynamics real quick. That's about what I expect. A lot of you are influencing up or influencing across. Oh, you know what? Okay. I'm noticing there's a couple agency people here or consultant people here, which is fantastic. So everything I'm about to talk about, super applicable for you, but when you are coming from a third party, an agency, just ping me directly. I got a couple things that are super, super helpful for that. But everything we're about to talk about is going to be really effective for you. All right, when I get into tactics about influence and persuasion, I like to do like the Doctor Strange thing and put the warnings up front. So when I talk about influence and persuasion, I'm not talking about like Jedi mind tricks. I'm not talking like this isn't a lesson in the dark arts, you know. What I'm talking about are these are just little personal tools and tactics to help elevate your executive presence. Cool? And I also want to highlight too that you do not use these things for malicious purposes. Actually backfires pretty badly against you. Going back to the authentic leadership aspect, you are more effective when you are coming from a good and honest and true place. So, whenever you start the process of influence and persuasion, you always lead with the other, with the person you are working with. There's a guy named Dr. Stephen Cohen who codified this pretty well. He called it the with it, the what's in it for them. You want your ask, or the thing that you are trying to influence, to somehow, some way, be aligned with something that's specifically important to them. Their deliverables, their goals, their aspirations, or even a higher calling. It'd be more effective. So this goes back to like why time is important, because some of the best leaders that I've worked with, not just design leaders, but like leaders period, like titans of industry, they spend the bulk of their schedule getting to know people, their teams, the work issues, the missions, the things that drive business. So all of those aspects, they're spending time into. And you gotta understand that as a design leader, and not just within your silo or your org, but throughout the company. So it's really critical for you to identify the with it, the what's in it for them. Now, rarely, if ever, do I get what I want the first time. Like, influence is not like a one-time only event. It's a process. And as a very high framework, you want to test your position on things. So you go to somebody like, hey, what do you think of X? Or, hey, this is what we're going to try and do. You want to listen to their feedback. And listening means like you really need to take it in. You're going to test their position with like the input that they provided. You're going to develop it. You're going to do more testing. You're going to take that idea and develop it further with the people that idea affects. Inside the company, outside the company, customer focus, super important. The users of your product, the business leaders that are involved in it. You're going to get as much research and get more buy-in as you possibly can. You're going to incorporate those compromises and just make it the best possible. Now, if this sounds like a slow and long process, it is because it is. There's a reason why diplomatic peace talks take years. So work this process. Now, doing this the time that I have, I've had the unfortunate pleasure of seeing a lot of leaders crash and burn with the persuasion thing. Here are the three big ones for you to avoid. Fear is a horrible way to influence. Any leader who's using like intimidation tactics or just kind of being an ass to get what they want done, they're just not effective leaders. Not because it's a shitty thing to do, which it is, but it's ineffective. Fear only works once. After that, it becomes detrimental to you and what you are trying to do. Anyone who ever had to tell kids, like, I'm going to turn this car back around, like, knows it doesn't work. You know, fear is a horrible motivator. Another big one is the hard sell. I see this a lot with, like, business people, like, right out of school, where they have this strong opening position of what they're trying to influence, and with persistence and brute force, they try to, like, bulldoze their idea through, which it's not effective. The behavioral psychology actually works against that pretty hard, because when you lead with like a big opening position, what you're doing is you're actually giving the other person something to latch onto and argue against. So not incredibly effective. And the one I see a lot with like new design managers or new managers period is this idea of like compromise is like giving up, or it's a sign of weakness, which couldn't be further from the truth. And anyone who's practiced design thinking, which a lot of us here have, knows that like when you compromise or when you build shared solutions, the work is just better. So, you know, keep on doing that. And as a design leader, you want to be known as someone throughout the organization, or just in general, who listens to people, who incorporates thinking from others, and is flexible in what they're trying to do. Now, As companies are becoming more matrix and cross-functional collaboration is the norm, Vivian actually from Google did a really great job talking about this earlier. This kind of like command and control thing, it's not as effective, like where it's not really like the boss giving the edict down to all the people and they got to do it. It's just not as effective as it could be, especially if you're in like a finance or a digital company. Like that's just how a lot of things are working. There is this kind of us versus them mentality that's unfortunate. Like I talk to a lot of design and product teams and they look at marketing or engineering or the business parts as like obstacles in the way of good design. And it's just not great. And as a design leader, if you can influence the outcome you want without dropping the because I said so bomb, you're just more effective as a leader. So, whether you're presenting to your direct boss or like a board of directors, like whatever it is you're doing, nothing should come as a surprise to them. Prewiring is where you individually take the key stakeholders through the materials in private. Like rarely when I'm presenting to a CEO is it something like they've never seen before. Don't do that. So there's a couple reasons why pre-wiring is effective. There's like a basic tenet in influence and persuasion that people will support things that they're a part of. So you want to build upon that. Another thing is the stakeholder is going to add value. They're going to have insight into something like maybe not at your level, or they might have historical knowledge to make the outcome better. They're going to add value in some way, shape, or form. Also gives you the opportunity to address any potential red flags in private. I've made that mistake a couple times. We'll never do it again. Also, the good stakeholders and the good executive leaders, they're going to know to start giving you air cover. When they're aligned with your idea, they're going to help take away some roadblocks. If there are people who need persuading, or if there's political things that need to happen, the good leaders are going to take care of that for you. Here are a couple things which are super effective. I love the 2-minute drill, where I'll grab someone like between meetings, or I'll stop by somebody's desk super quick and be like, hey, what do you think of X? I wanted your advice on this thing. And ideally, it needs to be something really short that you could take care of in a second, but it's a good way to like kind of build that rapport. The regular updates, those regular one-on-ones with the project teams, and you want people who are going to be involved in any part of the process, like the business leaders, be like, hey, what's up? Come to this, or we're going to give you a readout of this meeting. But these regular updates are really good for driving progress, getting people involved, incorporating their feedback. Or if you need the more formal approach, a week or two before. Just kind of like have time definitely scheduled with the key stakeholders of the leadership where you can like walk them through everything. But just make sure you have enough time to address their concerns before the final thing is due. Okay. There are two aspects of how someone becomes convinced of something. How the information is delivered and how they process that information once they have it. These are called modes of persuasion. There are a bunch of them that are really effective. I'm going to share the two that I use pretty regularly. Okay? The first one is called the appeals of argument. This is great. This is actually one of the first ones I learned at Harvard Business School. It dates back to Aristotle, and it's like the FedEx logo. It's been around forever, and it just works. This is where there are three very strong components of how you persuade someone. There's the logical part, the emotional part, and the credible part. The logical part. This is commonly shared beliefs. These are universal truths. These are like data, charts, numbers, and like the analytics. What do those data, charts, and numbers tell you? Okay? There's the emotional part. There's the hopes and fears, the passion and needs, the scare me or surprise me. That last one's really big at GE. And then the last part is the credibility aspect of what you're trying to do. That is, hopefully as the design leader, you are the subject matter expert of what you're talking about. If you have challenges being perceived as a subject matter expert, just ping me. I have some good material on that I will share with you. Similarities to the audience. And the audience in this case is the person you are trying to persuade. The more you are aligned with them, the more similar to them, the easier your job is. Strong moral fiber. Anybody who was following like the Robert Mueller investigation, like you heard that phrase a lot? Credence or halo effect, anything that adds validity or any waves that you could ride that's aligned with what you're trying to do. Now, you got to use all three parts. A lot of designers just kind of do the emotional thing. You got to use all three parts because it's going to be effective for you. You listen to any lawyer give a closing argument, you listen to a politician give a stump speech, you're going to hear all three of these things. Okay? So incorporate them all together. Now, accessing cues. I'm going to yada yada the cognitive science behind this. People receive and process information in one of three channels: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. That's seeing, hearing, and feeling. Okay? Now, they process this information, and there is going to be one channel that they are dominant in. You can tell which channel that they are dominant in by how they speak. This I use a lot when I need to understand like a CEO or an executive that I don't have any insight into. So it's a really good shorthand for trying to pick that up. There's a couple people here who I've worked with in some capacity know that I take copious notes during meetings. This is actually one of the things I'm tracking in the meetings of like what their channels are and how these people receive things. So visual channel language. People will say things like, oh, I see what you mean. Oh, can we look at this? Or shine some light on this. Do you kind of see? These are visual language people. When they start talking like this, that's the channel that they're dominant in. Auditory language. They'll say things like, oh, that rings a bell. Oh, sounds great. Loud and clear. They'll use language like that. And then the kinesthetic channel, like they'll say things like, oh, can we unpack this? Or hold on a minute, or I don't feel it yet. They'll use language like that. It's really interesting. You may be at a break after this or at the bar, and you'll start noticing this from the people you'll be talking to. It's fascinating to watch. Now, these accessing cues are super, super helpful. If you are speaking in a channel and the person is receiving in a different channel, there's going to be a pretty significant disconnect. You ever like talk with someone, like you're in a meeting like that, and you're like both having a conversation, but like you're not understanding each other? It's like you could be from two different planets. Yeah, okay, this is why. This is the behavioral science behind it. Now, here's the thing I want to highlight for you. Most creatives, not all, but most of them are visual channel dominant. Most business leaders are not. So you need to be aware of that when you are trying to do the influence and persuasion process. One of the things that I've had success with when I don't know things, or I don't know the channels of people, or I'm speaking to a wide audience, is I'll just speak in all channels. Clear? Sound good? Feel okay? Okay. I like including this part in the talk. So if there's like an influencing tip that you want to include in this, I will absolutely include this in the notes and send it out to everybody. 100% optional. You don't have to do it, but if there's like an influencing tip that has been super effective for you, it's great. Every time I do this, I get like, between 50 and 100 ideas, some of which I've never even heard of before. I think they're great, and I want the knowledge to be shared. So this is a great thing for you. Okay. For the sake of time, I'm going to keep on rolling. All right. So when I was doing executive training, there were some really fantastic insights about the decision-making styles of executive leaders. Human beings are consistent with their behavior. If you understand how an executive leader makes decisions, it's a lot more easy to influence them. There's 5 big ones. Now, this isn't like definitive by any stretch of the imagination, but from my experience, it's pretty close. I'm going to focus on the 2 that I have worked with the most as a designer. It's the leader-follower and the charismatic. So leader-follower, this is going to be about 36% of the leaders that you're going to work with. These are people that they compare things to past experiences, they are looking for proven methods, and they're looking for trusted sources. Okay? Here are some of the things to include in your persuasion. Whether it's a deck or it's a conversation or however you are conveying information to them, these are the things to include. Trusted peer groups. Their past personal decisions. Minimal risk, you want to try to levy that as much as you can. Case studies, your best friend, especially like references or testimonials. These are all really good things to have in your deck. And also, I want to stress this too, like the less pages, don't give them a 50-page deck. Most executive leaders won't look past the 2nd page. I know most of you may know that, but just want to highlight that information. The emotional connection, that what you're trying to do, is you want to make them just feel confidence in the idea. That's the emotional connection that you're trying to make with that as you're persuading them. Okay? So it's one really good framework. Okay. The charismatic one. With the research, this is about 25%, but I'm going to flag that number. We're all designers here. Most of us usually ladder into marketing, product, or tech. Is that about right? Okay. So with that being said, this number's a lot higher. It's between 30 and 40. Okay? These types of leaders, these charismatic leaders, they get excited about new ideas, they want balanced information, they tend to have dominant personalities. If you're picturing people, that's okay. Things to include in your persuasion. You want the critical information up front. Your first pager, that's what it's going to be. You want simple and straightforward arguments. You want to draw a very thin line from idea to execution. You want to tie it to ROI, and you want to talk about competitive differentiation. That's what you're going to include in your persuasion. And like emotionally, you want to be honest with them. These are people who like the level set and the trusted approach. You want to talk about the downside. I've also had a lot of success when I've socialized it with their peers. Like, I'm presenting something to a CEO, like, hey, you might have had a question about the finance. I talked to the finance people, we're okay. I talked to production and dev, they have enough like human power to deal with, like, just socializing in that way, super, super effective. Okay. All right, so we've talked about setting up strategies for success. We've talked about some tactics and frameworks on how to put this all together. So you have a lot of tools in your toolbox from this too, okay? Now, last part before I get to the end. I'm gonna give you a minute or so, contribute some insights, you'll get the notes. So I'll give you like a minute or two to take care of that, and then we'll get to the last part. And as well, if you scroll down a little further, there's a little box called questions. You can start filling those in if you want me to. And I'm super easy to get a hold of. Like, my contact information's here. I'm very accessible. So if you have questions like after the fact, or you want to ping me about stuff, which is super common, just reach out. Also, with all of those questions, I answer every single one. So don't be bashful. It's a really good question. That's actually an influencing technique. Anyone who does data and analytics user research? Yes? No? Maybe? Okay. So NPS people, when you're doing Net Promoter Score, if you're doing a 1 through 10 scale, when you eliminate 7, you get a more accurate result. So it's a way to influence a positive outcome. Yeah, no worries. That's okay, man. It's okay. It's all good. All right. So you can still fill this out. And also, I don't package this up. I probably won't do it until Monday. So you do have time to kind of fill this in. But the sooner you get it out, the sooner I can take care of it for you. The thing that I would like to leave you with is, so I was doing executive training, and I was in a session about complex negotiation, which is when you have to come to a resolution with like 9 different parties. And it's me with like a bunch of like diplomats and lawyers. Actually, one of my partners, he handled the kidnap and ransom cases for the Army. Like, super fascinating work in this one. And this particular session, it was interesting because I was working with leadership, and a lot of the business people I talked to, there was like, oh, complex negotiation, you know, take it back, that's like a big thing. And I always find that funny because, like, as designers, that's like what we do every day. Like, you try launching a product where like marketing and legal and all the business units are aligned, like, this is what we do. But neither here nor there. So we're having this session, and it kind of builds up into this like real life thing that you got to do where you have to come to resolution with a lot of people. And you get like a private package of like, here's what you can influence or negotiate, and there's like a point value to it. They gamify this stuff. And you know, you get your points at the end. So I did okay. You know, I was kind of learning these techniques, and I was really proud of kind of what I did. And there was another group that I've been in a lot of like heated corporate meetings, and I don't know what was going on here, but it was just bad. And this one young lawyer, there was just a lot of challenges with this team. And we didn't know this, but in her packet, she had, you know, she could negotiate a good deal and influence a positive outcome where everybody's kind of happy. She gets like a respectable point value. But we didn't know was that there was also, if you destroy the negotiation and you make everyone miserable, you get this like crazy high point value. Sure enough, that's what she did. She got her high points, and she was really pleased with herself. So, the group of us, all of us were kind of talking about this outcome, and she was very pleased with herself. And we're doing the feedback. And I was like, you won, and that's great, and we're all kind of talking. But it was really interesting as we started digging in deeper that she just really made her colleagues miserable. And she basically told us what she would do to win. She will sacrifice her team, she will make everybody miserable, and in order for her to get what she wants out of this. And as we're kind of unpacking this, she started to realize the mistake that she made. Anybody know what a Kobayashi Maru is? Yeah, my shouts to my sci-fi heads. So a Kobayashi Maru, it's an exercise that it's designed so you fail. And they want to see how you deal when there are problems. And that's what this was. Needless to say, she had a very challenging time for the rest of the session. She spent a lot of effort in trying to curry back into favor of people there. So the thing that I would like to leave you with is you're going to have a lot of jobs in your life. You're going to have a lot of different roles. But you're going to have one reputation. So do right by people. Thank you all very much. I will stay here until they kick me off and answer questions. Thank you very much.
And we do have time for Q&A, so any questions for Andrew?
I will, let me do this inclusive. You could start loading in questions. Okay, not yet, but looking forward to the notes. Would love some more information on executive coaching. I do it on a case-by-case basis, but there's a lot of really good people out there. I will do a shout-out to the Design Leadership Forum, like Adam, who's here somewhere in the back, the gentleman in the roguishly handsome attire. He runs the Design Leadership Forum, which is a great thing to kind of bounce ideas off people and work with your peers to kind of figure some things out. I think executive coaching is really helpful, but a lot of the stuff you can get through your peers. You said agency-specific tactics. What are they? Okay, in the notes, I will include some stuff. One of the things high level on this is when you are not a part of the culture, you have to influence in other ways. One of the things that's really effective would be when you have an advocate. Someone who is not you, who is not part of your organization or your agency, to recommend you or to speak highly of you. This is one of the reasons why agencies talk about awards so much, because it's a third-party accolade for what you do. When you are a third party and you talk about how great you are, it actually works against you. So if you can work around that and have others speak for you just for the general introduction, that's like a quick pro tip. There's a couple other things I'll include in the notes. Okay, the difference between design leadership and leadership in any other discipline. I think it's just a more focused thing, but if you want me to dig deeper onto that question, just throw it in there. Accessing cues. The accessing methods make a lot of sense. The phrases to identify make sense, but how would you shift the conversation to speak someone else's channel? Switching, see, feel okay, can be enough. Okay, really good question. So how do you channel switch, or how do you start talking to the people who are receiving that channel? So when you are presenting an idea, let's say someone is auditory, because that's a challenging one. If someone is auditory and you are presenting creative or an option to them, you're going to say things like, imagine the sound of how excited people are going to be when they use this product. Kind of see how you understand that? You're going to use auditory cues of painting a picture using sound. So however you can incorporate those things, or you can say, like the kinetic one, you can say, like, I really want to unpack this idea for you, and I want you to get hands-on on this so we can figure out this challenge. Like, you want to use language like that as you are describing and talking about things, okay? Have you written any books on this material? What books you might recommend? I'm actually halfway through writing a book. I have a ton of content through Envision, through various conferences. You could just Google me. There's like a ton of stuff there. Books, would you recommend? I love this game. I love recommending books. Anyone who has seen me give a talk from my office, there's like a wall of really good business stuff. Focus your question. Ask me that again, and I'll give you a short stack of really good stuff. Any resource recommendations for those who are new to design leadership? Mentors are really good. Find mentors in your company, and it doesn't have to be one. You have many of them throughout your career. One of the great things I had was like, I was able to, I wanted to identify people who are really good at something that I was lacking. Like one of them was project managing. I suck at PMing. So I found someone who was on my team who was just really good at it. This person was actually junior to me. And it was great. I was like, hey, can you help me with this? And it was good. It built the trust and bond between them. So mentoring, really good. New to design leadership. It's becoming more of a thing now that conferences are having tracks in creative leadership, kind of like what's going on today. There's some really good books out there. I think Radical Candor is a really good one. I haven't read Julie Zhu's book from Facebook, but I hear good things about it. And there's a couple business leader stuff, but they don't. It's more management books than leadership books, so I hasten to recommend those. But if there's anything specific, just let me know. Okay? One more. Any specific tip for true introverts? Leaders who are neurodiverse. Okay, that's actually a good one. The high-level answer for that, you want to check out this woman who's amazing. Her name is Susan Cain. She wrote a book called Quiet. As I'm seeing a couple nods, Quiet Revolution, really good stuff. She gave a talk at How Design Live, I think it was 2 years ago. If you get access to that talk, really good stuff. Who else is really good? There's some stuff out there. There is. I'm halfway through a talk right now, just specifically focusing on introverts. Give me your email. I'll ping you when I'm done. Susan Cain. Yeah, it's called. Her company's called Quiet Revolution, and her book is really thoughtful. It's actually a good read, so it should be okay. Any other questions you think now, later? I'm super chatty. I will have a cocktail after this. Introvert, we crash hard. But yeah, like if you have any questions, just feel free to ping me. It's amazing. You guys have been a great audience, so thank you very much. I want to take y'all home.